Hello. Have you ever had thoughts that kind of stick with you and you don't really want to be thinking about them, but they're playing on repeat and they're causing anxiety and making you worry and feeling nervous? You ever experienced that? Or how about when you get really sad and you just have that thought that's so heavy, you can't let it go? Or what about you get angry and you're so angry and you just can't let it go? You know, those feelings that linger and hold on and they wreck your day. Have you ever had those? Me too. I'm Kalinda, and in 2012, I beat anxiety and panic disorder. Would you like to know how? I'm happy to tell you. So, back when I was younger, I spent a lot of time feeling anxiety. I spent a lot of time having panic attacks. Now, if you've ever had a panic attack, you know those things are terrifying. At one point, when I was 36 years old, I had a panic attack that lasted for 7 weeks. Those things are supposed to last 7 minutes. And how panic attacks manifested in my body was I would get extreme pain in my side and I would have to bend over because it hurt so bad. I couldn't breathe and I really thought I was going to die. That's where my head went. And so what would happen is I would go to the doctor, they would tell me nothing was wrong, I'd be in excruciating pain, and I thought that they just didn't know what they were talking about. What I didn't understand back then is that thought and anxiety and panic and all those other ugly feelings can actually create physical pain in the body. Like you can literally feel it and it's not comfortable. So when you're going for tests, when you're going to try to get answers and everybody's coming up and they're saying, no, there's nothing wrong, they're not lying to you. What's happening is your head and your body are in war. And what happens is your mind is trying to go off in one direction, and your body's like, hey, wait, you need to fix this. So when there's that mind body disconnect, you got a problem. Now, where does that disconnect come from? Well, I'm just going to back up a bit here and explain to you exactly how it happened in my world, and I'll see if you can relate. So, I was having physical pain and I wasn't getting any answers. No matter how much I tried, nobody could tell me what was going on. So, I had been through a lot of trauma. I had lost a lot of people that I loved. My uncle had passed away from lung cancer. I don't know. There was lots of things going on. Life was stressful in my head, and so I I had a lot of responsibility, and I had a lot of worry. I had a lot of panic. I had a lot of I was really stuck in survival mode, self-inflicted for the most part, but it was survival mode all the same. And so what would happen is I would feel this pain and my head would start dreaming off worst case scenarios. Okay, so worst case scenario, what was going to happen? Well, I was a single mom of 2 children. So if something happened to me, what would happen to my kids? And then that story reel would take off. Or I really thought that it was going to be some sort of terminal thing or some sign of chronic illness. And so my head would venture off in a direction of worst case scenarios every single time. And at one point in my life, after a lot of fighting and a lot of arguing and a lot of doing everything. So when I was in the worst part of it, the medication stopped working. I they were trying to give me antidepressants and I was just numb. Like I couldn't get out of bed before the medication. I couldn't get out of bed with the medication. And when I went to the doctor, they just said, this is as good as it gets because painkillers don't work on this tempo. For example, if you go to the dentist and they give you freezing in order to be able to do work on your teeth, your mouth freezes, right? Like your lips get big and it's feeling numb. Yeah, no. Last time I went, I chipped a molar on popcorn and it took 12 needles. It didn't freeze. I can still feel it. And the little bit that kind of numbed it, like my lip never really got big. It just kind of felt a little something. I mean, it was gone within an hour, and I'm sure it should have been frozen for an entire day, right? So the thing is, when your head gets into that situation, it's pretty hard to fix it. And so what causes it? Well, it took me a lot of certifications and a divine download and a lot of guidance with a lot of support to figure this out. But what happens is when your body remembers what your head forgets, it's relentless until the mind and body come back in agreement. So this is what happened to me. I had spent 2 years going to countless appointments because remember I told you that story in my head had me convinced that my kids were going to have to live without a mom. And so I needed to do everything I could in order to be able to stay on this side of the green to be with them. It was non-negotiable. And so I had to figure out what it was that was the cause. Battling the symptom wasn't working for me. I didn't have the tools that most people have in order to put a Band-Aid on a symptom. They didn't work. So what's next? And when I went through that, I had to figure out how the body works together as a whole, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Well, I was eating super clean back then. I wouldn't eat anything. I was still sick. Like I wouldn't eat anything processed. I was playing by all the rules. Still sick. I was going for counseling. Yeah. Still sick. I was trying a whole bunch of things. Like I'm talking a ton of things. And every time I would go, I would get a little bit more frustrated because that didn't work and this didn't work. And I kept on telling myself, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. To the tune of, I mean, when you're spending $50 to $150 an appointment and it's racked up to $70,000 in 5 years, you know that I wasn't sitting still, right? Even though it was difficult to get out of bed, I was probably putting myself into healing crisis after healing crisis in hindsight, but it didn't matter. I was tenacious and I needed answers. And when it got to the point that I was just about ready to give up, just about ready, I had a friend that had let me know about this person that helps with anxiety. I'm like, okay, I'll try anything. And I went and I sat down in that office. And in 30 seconds, the one biggest challenge that I had back then, the one biggest thing that I was having a problem with was when I would think about my uncle, I would start to cry and I couldn't stop. And when I had booked this appointment, what had happened was I couldn't even talk to tell her why I was there. And she had a list of certifications like this, right? Well, how do you go to somebody's office, try to get help, and you can't tell them even why you're there? And so without even asking me any questions, she just looked at me and she said, it's grief. Now, the conversation that happened with that, I didn't know what had happened, because in my head, I was talking, but my mouth wasn't telling her what the thoughts were in here. And she doesn't have ESP. So it took me about 3 years to understand how weird that conversation was. But what had happened was she asked me why I was there. In my head, I was trying to tell her that I couldn't stop crying over my uncle. And so she detected grief from 2009, which was the year that he died, released the grief from that emotion. I stopped crying instantly. And then she asked me, well, now can you tell me? She meant, can you tell me why you're here? But in my head, that emotion to that memory was already gone. And I, instead of being trapped in this loop of remembering all the grief and the trauma and the stress of him getting sick and dying, took me back to a place in my head where I remembered all the good times. And in that exact moment, it took seconds, and I was back into all the great things about him. And so I started telling her about all the great things about my uncle. But that isn't why I booked the appointment. I booked the appointment because I wanted to stop crying. Well, I've been in her office now for 2 minutes and I've stopped crying. It's done. But the next thing surfaced because I couldn't stop the crying. I stopped the crying, and then the next layer of the problem surfaced, and that kept on happening. So it took me probably, I think I went for about 7 sessions, cleared a lot of stuff, but that onion layer kept on coming and coming and coming and coming and coming. And I was still dealing with anxiety and I couldn't figure out what is going on. So I ended up becoming an emotion code practitioner, and it ended up that I was able to beat anxiety in January of 2012. So what had happened was I was able to get myself back to the place where you could actually figure out what the cause of the anxiety was. And once I released that, I was free. I've never had another panic attack since, thank goodness. So since then, I did realize that there's a faster way to get this done. I took 18 certifications through this whole journey. And what I have done is I have kind of combined everything that I learned in those 18 certifications, and I combine it with some mindset tools that I've learned over the years, some of the insights that I learned through my journey through hell with anxiety, and I've packed it all together to help people today, and so that they can escape faster. And right now, I am offering some sessions, 30-minute group sessions. If you want to get the details on that, just click the link below and you can sneak in. It is limited because I like to give every person the attention that they need, and 30 minutes isn't a long time to do it, but you come with your biggest challenge and I am happy to help you clear that in 30 minutes. Sound good? All right, check out that link below, find out what time works best for you, and I look forward to working with you. Bye for now.